course, right, Rob?
Not offhand. I think Tim Schafer is the one I'm familiar with.
John Schafer was the designer on Civilization 5.
Ah, gotcha.
Who then went on to his own independent game, At the Gates, that he was working on for, I think we're at 5 or 6 years of development. Well,
Sheesh.
the news, it's kind of a bittersweet piece of news that came out this week was, the good thing is that the game is officially going to be released, I believe, either next week or the week after. But the bad thing was he posted kind of a post-mortem about just how much of a toll it took on him to make that game, and some very depressing stuff in there about just completely losing all motivation to keep going. He apparently got, I think, addicted to stimulants at one point while trying to make the game, and a whole lot of stuff that went on behind the scenes that almost broke him to get the game made.
Yeah, I hate hearing those stories, but I know over time those become like, they become romanticized. You know what I mean? That someone poured their life, their heart and soul into a game, and excuse me, it finally launches, but they almost ruin their lives to get it out there. Certainly that happened a lot in film in the 90s. I think Robert Rodriguez did that for El Mariachi, starting to donate blood to keep that game going, or that film going. But yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking, you know, when you think about it, because someone dedicates their life to a project, and you never really hear about the ones that don't make it, you know, that don't finish or don't do well. And, you know, these people's lives get kind of ruined. They lose friends and family and, of course, money and their car and their house. And I've only heard a couple of stories along those lines, but it's never a good story unless it's, you know, unless there's a happy ending.
Yeah. I mean, we said the same thing about Cuphead as well, with the developer taking out a second mortgage on their house to finish the game and put everything they wanted into it. And yeah, as you said, Rob, there are a lot of people who romanticize about that level of passion. I mean, we see major studios and publishers kind of exploit that passion, you know, by saying, oh, you don't want to spend an extra 10 to 15 hours a week working? Well, I guess you don't have the passion. You know, we'll just get somebody else who's, you know, more, you know, passionate about video games than you are.
Yeah, and that's such an easy argument to make to someone who has the skill and the talent, but, you know, just also does not have the time. Time and like dedicating one's life savings and personal time in favor of other things in their life does not equate to passion necessarily. So it's a tough thing to get rid of, and like you say, it does, and we've discussed in the past, it does kind of seep into the industry quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of independent developers as well, like we've said this before about how many people get into the game industry and try to build their first game or trying to grow as an independent developer tend to become blinded by that passion. Like I've said this before, like when I post like pieces on Gamma Sutra or design talks, there's always people who will say, oh yeah, what kind of, you know, how can that help me? Or, you know, are you just, you know, talking smoke? And they're not really reading between the lines about how people get really blind about passion, about not understanding the foundation of game design. Because I think that's another major part, and why I think the passionate side is so dangerous, is that many people will just look at video games for the art. They just want to tell a good story. They want, you know, make something that's emotional to them. But at the end of the day, if you don't make something that people want to play, it doesn't matter how much passion you put into a project if nobody wants to play your game.
Yeah, and, you know, per Draken's thing, it's like, is it worth it? And it comes down to, what do you care about in life? And certainly people in their 20s and like college age folks and in their 20s tend to be more passionate about that kind of thing, and then grow out of it over time, or whatever the proper phrasing is for that kind of thing. I had a similar experience, but I was never a developer. I was always just in the industry. But knowing the indie community, you know, from a closer distance than now, there's a lot of pressure to be just dedicated to that community, to your art, your craft,
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, Draken, you could actually, if you have classmates who are have that little dedication, that's an interesting tidbit
Mhm.
to bring on, because it can be very peer pressure. It can be very like, you're a loser if you're not doing it this much. If you're
Mhm.
not dedicating your life, if you take a job with a big company, you're selling out,
If you do
that kind of
marketing,
thing.
you're selling out.
Yeah,
You have a Facebook ad. How dare you? You're no longer an artist.
yeah. Yeah, you got to be constantly putting out content, and um, it's a weird existence now, especially with all of the multimedia, like the social media you have to be part of to succeed. It seems anyway. Yeah, there's a lot of pressures to do it all yourself and not let anyone help you, because if you do, then it's not your art or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, I knew somebody like that from a few years ago, who he was one of those guys who was very smart, but he had very little in terms of social skills, and he said that he can't. He always has his mentality. He can't stand somebody else working with him or asking for help or stuff like that. And you really can't be like that, I think, if you want to succeed in the game industry.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. Oh, I mean, that is interesting, because books as well. Like
Hmm.
it is, you dive in, and like I don't know, Josh, do you want to explore more on what you had just talked about? I kind of like blinded by my own opinions there.
Mm. About the guy.
Yeah,
Mm. It really isn't that much to say. We kind of stopped talking though, but he really wanted to get in the game industry. He's worked at a few smaller studios around here, but nothing that ever really broke out. And I
hmm
think that's kind of the thing that we see, is that so many people think that if I just keep making video games, I just keep making video games, one of them will be that big hit. I'll have the next Five Nights at Freddy's, I'll have the next Minecraft and all that. But it just seems like a lot of people put the art first, but don't realize that there is structure that goes into making a video game.
yeah. And the interesting part is the other side. The success,
Yeah.
because you'll hear from the success stories
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of times that it's their hard work that they put in that gave them the success. And certainly that is a major part of the equation. But there are a lot of people who put in that work who don't
Mm-hmm.
succeed. And there's no magic formula. Like you see so many of the articles on Kama Sutra, of the postmortems that suggest, this is how you make an amazing
Mm-hmm.
game. This is how you make a huge hit or a huge successful company. But it does. There's a lot of factors that go into that equation. They're different for everybody, and it's. I don't like the fact that, or the type of person who has a success and then belittles people who don't have that same success because
Mm-hmm.
they've figured it out. You know.
But even in that case, did they really figure it out, or was it just really a case of being in the right place at the right time, kind of thing?
I do think that it's hard, if you are successful. It's hard to look back and say, "Well, I was in the right place at the right time." I know some people do that, and that
Mm-hmm.
some people are humble about it, but other people, you can't. It's hard to accept that a part of it was luck, or a part of it was
Mm-hmm.
was your natural situation. It's hard to figure that you didn't do it all by yourself, and that's a tough thing to admit. Sometimes that's just a tough thing to grant when you talk about your own success and why you were successful and someone else wasn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's tough. That's what it comes down to, I guess.
Yeah. And we're seeing
Exactly.
that
No secrets.
And we're seeing that same issue of passion with a lot of stuff going on with YouTube and Twitch right now. We're in the age of streaming, so everybody wants to be the next Ninja or the next PewDiePie and stuff like that. And I still have very little care for watching other YouTubers or other people stream games, because I don't really want to hear what some random person thinks about Resident Evil or somebody else playing Dark Souls for the umpteenth time. I've already played Dark Souls. I don't need to watch somebody fail at it for 50 minutes and cursing over and over again.
Yeah, and Draken, you don't have to wish you cared about that stuff. Like,
That's a monkey's paw wish right there.
You're right. Like I do. I love watching streamers, and I don't really have any favorites anymore. I just like going on and just seeing what people are doing. I like watching speedruns. I like watching
Yeah.
esports. And I don't always have the time for that. Sometimes I just go weeks without ever having watched anything. But it is interesting. Like there's a lot of great content out there, but it's a crapshoot as to who's successful and who's not, and what they do to become successful. Some people create their own characters, and some people just go off of their own content. Some people just have content that's interesting. There's a channel on YouTube that's just a guy who posts cam footage of people getting towed outside of his office. That's the whole channel. It's weird to me what's out there. The internet always surprises.
Please tell me that channel gets like thousands of views per video.
Oh, easy. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands.
So what you're telling me, Rob, is I need to start like dyeing my hair. We need to have like those laser light shows you were mentioning earlier. Now
Yeah.
I remember what I was thinking about earlier when we had on what was his name? I think not Bruce Gardner. I forget his Bill Gardner. There we go. When we had him on, who worked on Perception, he had like one like those things that you could turn on that changes the lighting in the room. So while we were having him on for the live stream, his room like turned like blue, then turned like purple. That's what we need. That's what I need for these streams, right?
Yeah, I should get a smoke machine over here.
Nice. There we go. Perfect. We need one of those too, along with all the wires and the taxi cab and the green screen. Just like
Yeah.
have everything going at once. Nobody will
Yeah.
know what's going on.
Every feature have a million little plugins on the screen at any given time.
But yeah, like it's very hard. I think this may actually be kind of like our first topic then, since we kind of segue into it with John Schaefer. But it's very interesting about how so many people try to get into the game industry or try to get into YouTube or whatever, and like we said, like this is an industry that just spits people out. Like even if you know what you're doing, it still doesn't work for you. Like there are a few independent developers I follow, like on Twitter, and like they're like talking about how my game came out and it sold like 25 copies, and that's it. I think one of the guys who is on our Discord channel was talking about that on one of our when we did a video premiere on that. Like their game did not sell enough, so their studio I think is in foreclosure or it has to be shut down. And again, like you hear these stories, and it's very easy for people to just write off and saying, "Oh, they didn't work hard enough," or they didn't have the drive to do this. And no, I mean, I'm pretty sure they got that drive. And it's one of the things that just really annoys me about a lot of like YouTubers and streamers who cover the game industry, who talk about how developers are trying to cheat you, they're lazy, they're murdering the industry, blah blah blah, and that at the end of the day, like you can do everything right, and you can still fail. That's the scary part about the game industry.
Yeah, and it is scary. It's scary because it's also not like I don't think anyone actually looks for that that pitfall, that it is possible to fail and do everything right. And it's not to say that you should be afraid of that at all times. Like if you're making a project and you put yourself in 100%, that's admirable. It is admirable that you can do that. But don't be surprised by it. Like do prepare, do have a fallback plan. It is nice to have that stuff. It's very I'm an old person talking about it from experience, which means that I was that way when I was younger, so that's probably never going to change, and people my age are constantly going to spout that advice, and it's never going to be followed because that's just the way things are. Perfect example, Mike, is learn from your failures. You always be aware. That's perfect. I mean that should just be everywhere. Like everyone should have that stenciled on their forehead.
Yep. But as you said, Rob, there are a lot of people who will not pay attention to that. They'll think, oh, why should I listen to you? Like, again, like Cuphead, they took a second mortgage on their house and the game did fine. And going back to At the Gates with John Schaefer, as we're recording this, again, the game is at least a week to 2 weeks out, so we don't know how well it's going to go. But if it fails, he becomes another cautionary tale about working too much on a game. If he succeeds, then it's going to be, put 110% in, break your life to the point that you may lose your house, But if you get that dream game, then everything else is perfect.
Yeah, and it's easy to even look back at someone's attempt and just say, well, he did this wrong, and I won't make that mistake. And certainly that's possible, but like unlikely. You're going to make mistakes, especially if it's your first time. You're going to make mistakes. It's just how it is. That's just life. Rookies always make mistakes. So just know that you're going to make mistakes, and just make sure that you have something that either helps you find them, or that you know enough to know when you've gone down the wrong path at some point.
But I think a lot of people don't have that knowledge, which is, again, that's just part of growing and being experienced. But as Mike said, like, you have to be able to learn why something doesn't work. The old adage, if you don't learn history, or failing to learn history, you're going to be doomed to repeat, or ever, like the fancy version of that. And like, this is why, like, I see this from a lot of independent developers who keep making like the same kind of game. They keep making these games that, like, for people like us, like, we've seen a lot of video games. I mean, you do game producing. I've played over 2,000 games at this point, so there's not really much that either of us can say that we haven't seen before, be 100% unique. So it's very easy for us to look at these games and go, why is this in this game? Like, this is a mistake. And there are a lot of people out there, and I see this I mentioned this on a post I put up last week, that there are a lot of independent developers out there who use the word bad as a 4-letter word. Like, don't say a game is bad, don't say anything negative about this game, somebody put their heart and soul into it. But at the end of the day, you can still make a bad game even if you put your heart and soul into it. And it's important for you to learn why certain things don't work. And it's not a case of somebody, I said this on the post, like, there's this tendency when you're reading advice or reading guidance that somebody telling you that you can't do something or you need to do it this way. But for a lot of these cases, it's simply the foundational stuff. It's what people have learned that works. A famous example, having the right trigger on a gamepad you shoot. That's not, some stuffy old gentleman saying you must do it like that. That's just basically what we've all agreed on is the easiest way to implement that mechanic.
Yeah, I think we had mentioned, I mean, there might be a better way out there, but it's like deciding that you're going to only accept input in a different format of keyboard. Like R doesn't equal R anymore. This is a format people have. It's there for a reason. It's there because it makes it easier for other people to play and learn your game. If you change it intentionally to make someone think about their actions, but you're probably not going to be very successful in that unless the game is that amazing.
And I think this is one of the major points that we talked about before, that as we said earlier, that many people will look at big successes and just think, they did everything right, or they did X, Y, and Z, and magically it worked out. They're now rich beyond our wildest dreams. But one of the things, I've said this before, I want to get your thoughts on this as well, Rob, that the people who do succeed, the Darkest Dungeon guys, Clay Entertainment, and so on and so forth, like, the ones who do succeed tend to do more than just make a good game. Like, they seem to be on the ball about all aspects when it comes to game development and game marketing.
And that is true. And real quick, I wanted to comment on Draken's established game rules can be broken. Absolutely, they can. I feel like that's what the indie community is all about, is figuring out what rules can be broken in the right way. And yes, indie devs do get rich, and that's kind of a weird mixed bag there. But the people who do succeed, like you say, with the Darkest Dungeon, yes, they tend to hit it right on a lot of different areas. They also tend not to do it on their first try. It's rare that someone hits it out of the park in all areas the very first time they do it.
Oh yes.
Even if they take the game and they've just redone it, like, this is an old project, they've just redone it a million times. They're active, they're very positive, they have a good community, they have funding, they have time. Like, there's a lot of things you need to be successful your first time around. And you like being well-rounded. And Also, if you're not well-rounded like me, I'm not. I know that I need to get help in very specific aspects of running a business. That's a huge important thing that a lot of people forget. Money management, social media, and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course making a game from start to finish and knowing when it's ready and knowing what features are important. Again, that's an awful lot of trial and error that a lot of people don't see. When a success comes out, especially if it's a first time success, there's still most likely a lot of trial and error behind the scenes that just doesn't make the light of day.
Yep. It's kind of like, again, leaning this back to video games while my voice seems to cut out. As I was saying, leaning this back to game design, for instance, it's a really good comparison to what we see in like the CCG genre and what it means to build a successful deck. And like the point that I want to talk about is that it's very hard for people to understand why something works. And again, whether or not it's luck or because it was or you did enough stuff behind the scenes to make it work. To give you a point, like when I watch people play CCGs like Hearthstone or Gwent, everybody is dealing with RNG. That's the nature of the design. But when you become skilled enough, you know how to manipulate things, or you understand what's going on behind the scenes to try and tilt things in your favor. And in Gwent, for instance, you can have like a 40 or 50 card deck, but most people stick with 28 to 30 because they know that every card is going to be the best possible card that they want for that strategy. And it's very much akin to game development. Like I said with Red Hook, that a lot of people look at Red Hook games and they think, Darkest Dungeon, good game, earn lots of money, they're now set. But again, they don't see the fact that they spent, years doing social media push, concept trailers, the prototype, the Kickstarter, early access, etc., etc. So that when it does succeed, all of this stuff behind the scenes, you never notice unless you were following them from minute one.
Yeah, and it's very likely that dev who does everything right they're just naturally good at one of those things at the very least. So they may just be socially, adept. Like they may just gravitate towards, Twitter and Facebook and Periscope and all of that stuff that even stuff like I don't even know about that just naturally that's just how they are and who they are, and then the rest of it is what they have to work on. So it's really hard for someone to look at it and say, hey, well, why are they so good at that? Well, you might be great at programming or art, and they're not. They needed to work really hard at it where it's just a little easier for you. Like social media for me is almost impossible, but I'm good at a lot of other things. It's tough. Like I say the word, it's tough all the time, but it's funny. Like that's just what it comes down to, knowing that you're not perfect and just knowing what aspects you need to do better at.
I still have a blue tick yet. I'm like, I think I need to donate. I need to sell Twitter some of my blood, I think, to prove who I am for that blue check mark.
Yeah, that is like the new goal, isn't it? Trying to get some kind of get the social media network to approve of who you are as a person.
Maybe I'll try again. Maybe I'll get lucky this time. Yep. And like the Toby Fox example is another really good point. A lot of people only know him for Undertale or what was it, Downrune or whatever it's called right now. But they don't know that he did a lot of work behind the scenes. I think he was an extensive Earthbound modder, and he does indie music. Like there was work that went into his success that most people will not see or will never even understood. And as you said, it's very easy for people to think, oh, they just got lucky, or they just made a great game and that was it. But again, when it comes to the game industry, even if you know what you're doing, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to succeed. As with John Schaefer's point, that with At the Gates, I mean, he knows turn-based strategy design. Again, he was the lead designer on Civilization 5, so he has that genre down pat. But even with that said, it still, almost broke him to try and make At the Gates.
Yeah, and that does say a lot. You know, people who get experience working on games, you know, doing all kinds of stuff. I fall into that category, and I've tried branching out myself a couple of times and failed miserably. But you know, you don't hear about all that stuff. You don't see the person's resume or CV when you play the game. It's not stapled to the credits or anything like that. So it is you get that sexy notion that the person is just, this is their first title and they're just awesome. They're just the best thing ever and they're never going to fail. There's too many developers who do great the first time and then do terribly the second time. And you know, as you said before, you know, you think that it might be luck or it might be this or that. When it is, it's a mix of everything. It is all of the above.
Or if the game fails, then people just think, oh, excuse me. When the game fails, then they think, oh, this developer is just a hack. You know, they were just trying to steal money. You know, they don't care about the game. And again, like a lot of YouTubers perpetuate that myth that, you know, if a game is bad, then the developer was just horrible, cheating, lying, and all that stuff. But it does take a lot of work to make a game, no matter how big or small.
Yeah. And I always forget the name of the developer, and you always have to remind me that the developer that got in trouble with Steam, they had made a whole bunch of crap games, and
The Slaughtering Grounds.
Yeah, the Slaughtering Grounds. Like, I shouldn't say that. However much they did to, like, whatever they did to make the game not good, from a variety of perspectives, it still takes a lot of work, and it took a lot of dedication. And if anyone says that it is bad, and they infamously did not take criticism well, then you know, they didn't like, it is hard to make. Like, they did put time and passion into it, and that's why they reacted the way they did, because they didn't see it as bad. They just saw it as a passion. Very likely, they didn't see themselves as trying to rip people off. They just saw themselves as trying to churn out games.
Yep. Jim Sterling. But yeah, like, as we've said, like, so many people will never see how the sausage gets made, and many developers will never say how it gets made. And there's more to things, I think, than we can go into for this section about that one statement, because there are a lot of people who view, again, like, anything bad as being like this intentional slight, you know, you trying to scam the consumer, you're, you know, being malicious and stuff like that. Yeah. And oh yeah, like I said, Mike, earlier, a lot of people think that video games are this, you know, magical creature that, you know, you can never truly understand. But when you've played, you know, 800 platformers, you tend to figure out what platformers are good and bad. Or if all you do is play like first-person shooters or sim games, whatever, like, it's very easy to see the issues there.
Yeah, I once like, I watched a Planet Coaster stream, and the guy was saying, you know what, like, I've played this game so much, I see all of the terrible design mistakes that they've made that most people don't see, but I just have to ignore them now. Like, it is interesting when you put enough time into something that you basically are, you're an expert on it, you know, whether you wanted to be or not. And you can actually speak towards it, like you say with platformers. Like, you're going to be able to just say, okay, well, the jump mechanics here are bad, or why did they do this level this way? It becomes second nature to you.
And but even with that said, there are people who will just discount that by saying, oh, you're just hating the game, or, you know, you hate the game because of X, Y, and Z. You don't care about the design. And like we said, it's very dangerous to get into that mindset when you are just closing yourself out from criticism, because that's how you fail to learn and grow. Yes. I mean, like we do here on Game Wisdom, I certainly get a lot of criticism and constructive comments, or just witty remarks about what we do here that we try to learn from. And now that El Gordo is back, I'm sure he'll be leaving more as time goes on.
Oh, good. I'd like to see him on the show again, on the channel. And interesting part about the free games, it's weird. What is a free game in this particular case? Like, all like most mobile games seem to be free, but they have their costs elsewhere, and there's all kinds of money poured into them. So I don't know. I think we can criticize anything, and well, we here as talking heads on a show can criticize whatever we want. And Josh will get all the hate mail.
Exactly.
That's fine with me. Yeah.
Rob, why don't you mention just how much you hate Ninja and Fortnite right now, and then give them my email address.
Okay, I wish I could say that, but I don't know enough about either. I mean, I know enough to kind of hate on the Battle Royale aspect of things, but that's about it.
All right. But yet, like, it's very easy, again, to see those extremes, as Draken is saying. That there are people who look at video games, again, like, they will defend developers or publishers to the death. And then there are people who will outright, say all developers are lazy, charlatans trying to steal your money, and how dare they try and charge you for, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a weird thing. Having worked on AAA, that is definitely a target. The love-hate relationship between a AAA developer and their fans is an interesting thing to watch.
But we'll get back to there's still a few more news pieces I want to talk about before we get to our weird game segment, but we'll wrap up our first topic, I think, in the next minute or so. So I guess to get back to things, like bring this back to At the Gates, I'm definitely going to be interested to check it out. I already sent John a message to have him back on. And again, like, this is the point where I think I want to ask you about this too, Rob, with your background in video game producing. Like, the week before and the week of a game coming out, that's got to be like the most nerve-wracking time for a developer.
It is. It's extremely nerve-wracking. You second guess everything in the world. You feel like there's something more you could do, and you just have to shut out a lot of the self-criticism that's going through, because you have no real other feedback to go on. Unless you've been alpha forever and you have thousands of people already playing your game or what have you. But yeah, launching that, going back to Kickstarter, the week before launching a Kickstarter, the week after, because if you see success, give expectations, and you have an idea of what success is. And if you see that, I think that's a pretty good feeling. You feel a little gratified, and then that success can quickly go right out. Everything goes down, your sales go down or whatever. But if you don't see the success, like, your stomach is just doing backflips. Like, all you can think about is you wasted your last several years, or things are terrible, or what can I do different? How can I get sales going? You just second guess everything in your entire life, all of your choices since you were a toddler. If only I'd spent more time, in the library, learning code or what have you. It's just, you're never gonna. It's rare that you're gonna feel great, before you just launched a game or right after. I think once you've done several, it becomes easier. At least in my experience, a launch now is just whatever. We did what we can. It's time to go out. Like, there's no other time, no reason to wait on it. Let's get it out there, and just what happens at this point. It's out of your control.
Yep. And with At the Gates, again, he spent more than enough time on this game, so I'm sure he is very excited to see it finally come out. But as you said, Rob, that first week, especially if your game releases and it's not doing well, even if it picks up a few weeks later, if you just release a game and you have 10 copies sold, that's got to be one of the worst feelings in the world.
Oh, it is. I've been there. It's a terrible feeling. Ugh.
And
having flashbacks.
I'm sorry about that. But here's my final point. At the end of the day, again, going back to what Mike was saying earlier about learning from failure, you have to do research. You have to understand why things work, why they don't. Because it's very easy to do something and think, oh, this is just impossible to do, or, the other people just got lucky. But you have to understand why there is a craft behind game development, and understand again that there is more to it than just being a good programmer, or being a good artist, or sitting here coming up with ideas all day long. And if you don't do that, if you completely close out from all criticism, you don't do any play testing, you get no feedback, then making more games is never going to help you. And like good examples of like the counter of that would be people like Jake Burgett and Cliff Harris, who both have been in this industry for now over, I think, 15, 20 years. Why do I always forget his name? Jeff Vogue from Spireweb Software. He's been doing things for over, I think, 25 years at this point. And they understood that there's more to it than just trying to make whatever you want to and, hope people come and play your games. And if you can't learn, or you don't, or you refuse to learn, it doesn't matter how professional you are. And I have one final example, and then I'll throw it over to you, Rob. I remember when I was talking with Greg Johnson, who's working on the Toe Jam and Earl reboot that's due out, I think, next month or a little after that. And we were talking about his Kickstarter, with he had a lot of physical goods as rewards for it. And as you and I both know, Rob, like a lot of developers wrote like articles and think pieces saying, don't do physical rewards. They're going to kill your game. They're going to take so much out of you. And he was like, no, they're fine. Like, I did all my research. We spent so much time talking to manufacturers, distribution centers, shippers, all that, it was easy for us. And again, that goes, I think, back to this point that a lot of people who got into Kickstarter, they immediately rush physical rewards. I'm going to have a shirt, I'm going to have a jacket, I'm going to have a little novelty rings. Speaking of which, I saw this really cute thing when I was getting art supplies. I was thinking about buying like these little wooden treasure chests, and maybe I can do something game wisdom related and start selling them to people. But so many people got onto Kickstarter and were like, oh, I'm going to do this, it's going to succeed, and then it doesn't. Then they write pieces saying, physical goods are evil, don't do them. But again, if you do your research, you do the work, and understand that there's more to it, then it mitigates a lot of that risk and a lot of those dangers.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that is a big comment that goes out towards all things game related. There's so many little pitfalls that everybody thinks is the worst thing. Don't ever do that, but it is. It's all about preparation and knowledge and educating yourself. Like, physical goods, it's tough to do that. Like, you really do have to know exactly what all that stuff's going to cost and make sure that is padded in your Kickstarter ask, because if it's not, you're gonna already be behind the 8 ball, and if you haven't planned on the distribution, you're already behind.
Or and international versus domestic shipping as well.
Oh God, yeah, you've got to put rules on that, because people will catch you on it. And international is not fun to ship. So especially in certain areas, it makes it harder than others. But yeah, just be prepared, educate yourself on what you're doing, and just kind of have a plan. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but you got to at least know what's coming.
And as Mike was saying a few minutes ago, people want instant success. And I think that is kind of like the big sum here, that a lot of people see a big name YouTuber or a big name video game and think, I can just copy them and, I'm going to be set for life. But you can't do that, because again, you don't see the work that goes on behind the scenes. You don't understand that they may have did a lot of things that you will never hear about. But again, you only see where they're at now. You won't see where they were at 5 to 10 years ago. But I guess for you, Rob, do you have any final thoughts on the topic?
No, I think the one thing I would do would just be a segue to another big discussion, which is there's a big difference between hobbyist and professional, and you just got to know what you want out of making games, to deciding which one you want to be. Because you had mentioned knowing what, depending on the game you make, you can either make the game that you really want to make, which is hobbyist, or the game that that can be sold, which is business, and certainly hobbyists can be successful, but just know what you want to be and go towards that.
But I think with that, I want to get back to a few news pieces and then our weird game segment, because to kind of the at the gates talk segue into a major topic.